So a geometric sequence is formed by either multiplying or dividing from one term to the next, right? So you want to remember that arithmetic is either adding or subtracting, and geometric is either multiplying or dividing. So we're going to look at a few examples here. So let's begin with one that starts with a 9 and moves to 18. Now you want to be thinking about multiplication or division. So how do we get from 9 to 18 if we're going to either multiply or divide? So this one is fairly easy, I think. We know that if we were to take 9 and multiply by 2, that we would get 18. Okay. All right, so now what I want to consider is whether that same rule would apply going from 18 to 36. So if I take 18 and I multiply by 2, do I get 36? Okay, and we really probably need our calculators here. So we know that 9 times 2 is 18, 18 times 2 is 36. So we see our pattern emerging that we're going to multiply by 2 in between each of the terms. All right, so 36 times 2 is going to be 72. 72 times 2 is going to be 144. And 144 times 2 is going to be 288. All right, so that's going to complete my first geometric sequence. Right, we can see that the pattern was multiplying by 2. All right, so let's look at our second one. So our second one, we're going from 3 to 12. So again, let's think about multiplication here. 3 times what is going to give me 12? And we know that that's going to be 3 times 4. And we want to look at the second one and make sure that the same rule applies. 12 times 4, does that give me 48? It does. And so now we can see that we're going to multiply by 4 in between all of our terms. Okay, so our next one is going to be 48 times 4. So that is going to be 192. Right, and then the next one is going to be 192 times 4. So that is going to be 768. And again, use your calculator if you need to here. And then the last one, we're going to say 768 times 4. So that is going to be 3,072. All right, so now we move into our next example. And this one we see that the terms are getting smaller. We're going from 10 to 5 and then to a fraction. So I'm assuming that we're going to be doing some division. All right, so how do we get from 10 to 5? So going from 10 to 5, we are going to divide by 2. Now, you may want to remember that when we are dealing with fractions and division, that there's often you can either divide by 2 or you can multiply by a half, multiply by that reciprocal. And so you may find that that's a little bit easier to deal with, to think about doing a multiplication by a half. It's your choice, okay? But 10 times a half, you can plug that in your calculator and that's going to give you 5, okay? So let's check this next one. So going from 5 to 5 halves, let's think about it in terms of the multiplication. So if I were to multiply by a half, let's make sure that that works. So I'm just going to kind of come over here and write it out and show you and make sure that we're okay with that. So if I'm multiplying 5 times a half, remember that when you're multiplying fractions, you multiply straight across the top. So 5 times 1 is 5. And straight across the bottom, 1 times 2 is 2. All right, so we can see that that does equal the 5 halves. That's my third term. All right, so now I'm going to do the same thing for each of the other 3 missing terms. So I am going to start with 5 over 2, and I'm going to multiply by 1/2. Again, straight across the top, straight across the bottom. So 5 times 1 is 5, 2 times 2 is 4, and that gives me my next term. Okay, let's do it again. So 5 over 4 times 1/2. Straight across the top, 5 times 1 is 5, 4 times 2 is 8. Okay, and then the last one, we're going to do it one more time. 5 over 8 times 1/2, or divided by 2, however you want to do that. 5 times 1 is 5, 8 times 2 is 16. Okay, now let's do a couple of other examples. Now, we've got the same sort of thing happening on this one. We're starting at 125 and we're going down. So we know that we're either dividing or we're going to be multiplying by a fraction. All right, so how do we do 125 and we get to 25? So if we're thinking about it being a division problem, 125 divided by 5 is going to give me 25. So we know that divided by 5, again, is going to be the same thing as multiplying by 1/5. So we may want to do it that way. We may find that that's easier. All right, so going from 25 to 5. All right, so if I had 25 and I was multiplying by 1/5, again, straight across the top, 25 times 1. Straight across the bottom, 1 times 5 is 5. 25 over 5 is going to reduce to 5. So we see that that's going to work as well there. All right, so our pattern is going to be either to divide by 5 or to multiply by 1/5. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and finish up the other terms. So I'm at 5 now. I'm going to multiply by 1/5. It's going to give me 5 on the top and 5 on the bottom, which is going to give me a 1. Then we're at 1 and we're going to multiply by 1/5. That one is fairly easy. 1 times 1/5 would stay 1/5. And then finally the last one, we're at 1/5. We're going to multiply again by 1/5. That's going to give me 1 over 25. And that will complete that geometric sequence. All right, so let's look at the last one. Now, the last one is a case where we're not going to do the same thing for each of the terms. And you can see that because we're starting with 8 and we're going up to 24. And then we're dropping back down to 12, and then we're going up to 36 and dropping back down to 18. And so we know that we're going to be looking for a pattern there. All right, so how do we go from 8 to 24? So 8, if we're doing multiplication, 8 times 3 would give me 24. How do we go from 24 to 12? 24 divided by 2 would give me 12. How do we go from 12 to 36? 12 times 3 is 36, and we see that pattern emerging there. How do we go from 36 to 18? 36 divided by 2 gives me 18. So our pattern is that we're going to multiply by 3 and divide by 2. Multiply by 3 and divide by 2. All right, so the next one, we're going to multiply by 3. So 18 times 3 is going to give me 54. The next one, divide by 2. That's going to give me 27. Now we multiply by 3. That's going to give me 81. And that completes that geometric sequence. So again, just like with the arithmetic sequences, you can either have a problem where you're always doing the same thing, like on these. On the first one, we were always multiplying by 2. The second one, we were always multiplying by 4. Or you can have a problem where you're alternating, like in this last example, where we multiplied by 3 and then divided by 2. Multiplied by 3 and then divided by 2.